Think we're live on YouTube finally. Oh man, it's almost 5 a.m. in the morning, Eastern my time, and I'll tell you what. I wanted to wait as long as possible to do this because honestly, I didn't think this was going to happen. And I still don't believe that it's happening until I see it at 10 o'clock tonight. It's apparently Dana White got the job done. He found a place that accepted them into having a live event in Jacksonville, Florida, UFC 249. And since this lockdown has happened, we haven't had any live events at all in the United States. And it's frankly been driving me crazy. But man, here it is, and I am pumped. I cannot wait for tonight. Now, it's going to be a little crazy. There are not going to be any fans. It's going to be an empty arena event. We've seen this with the WWE, AEW, professional wrestling. They've been doing this. But as far as major sports go, this is it. This is the first taste we've had. And all the credit really has to go to, first off, the fighters for accepting to do this, because one of the fighters, Jacare Souza, actually tested positive the day of the weigh-ins, Friday, for the coronavirus, and he will not be able to fight. So credit goes to them. Big credit goes to Dana White for getting this done. And I was watching an interview with Dana earlier where he said, this is how crazy this guy is. He was like, it was actually fun trying to figure this out, trying to find a place to do this, to get everything in order, to do the testing and all of that and make sure it's all safe. The guy said it was actually fun getting this together. The guy has worked tirelessly, and he wants to keep, this is how crazy the guy is, he wants to keep his regular schedule. He's actually having the infrastructure built on a private island for them to keep that same schedule and for them to have fights on a private island just in case these individual state governments won't let them do this. It's crazy. It's awesome that we have it back, but it's still crazy. And like I said, until 10 o'clock tonight, p.m., I almost still won't believe that it's happening, man. But I wanted to come on here and talk about the fights, give my prediction on the fights, and yeah, a little bit of background on myself. I've been watching the UFC since the very, very early days. MMA in general. I've been watching since the Ken Shamrock, Hoist Gracie, Tank Abbott days, as far as the UFC. And then after that, I've watched Pride Fighting Championships, Strike Force, Elite XC, Bellator, King of the Cage, Affliction. If it's MMA, man, I am down to watch it. Kickboxing, Pancrase, I love it. I love combat sports. I've always been a huge fan of combat sports. Boxing as well. Of course, I was into boxing before MMA, but MMA took it to the next level in my eyes. I've been to the last two events that they've held in Detroit. As far as the UFC goes, I've been to UFC 123, which I believe was in 2012 at the Palace of Auburn Hills, I believe, if I remember correctly. And the main event was Rampage versus Machida. Rampage has always been one of my favorite fighters since back in the Pride days. The slam on Ricardo Arona, I believe it was 2003. iconic slam. It's where he picked the guy up and gave him a power bomb and knocked him out. Man, their heads clashed. Brutal knockout, but beautiful. So I've been a huge fan of Rampage for so long. I'm a huge fan of Nate Diaz, Jorge Masvidal. I was a big Tito Ortiz fan back in the day before he kind of got a little weird and married the adult film star Jenna Jameson. I don't know if they were ever married, but they were together. Let's put it that way. But enough about all that, man. Let's get into these fights. Jeez, what a stacked card. I mean, head to toe, this card is completely off the charts. The Anthony Pettis Donald Cerrone fight alone is the prelim main event, and that could easily be a main card main event any other time. No question about it. Let's start at the very beginning. Ryan Spann and Sam Alvey. That's the very first fight on this card, I believe. That's the way they have it listed here. Sam Alvey, Smiling Sam, the dude's been around for a long time. He's an underdog in this fight. The thing about this fight is it's listed as light heavyweight. And if I remember correctly, Sam is normally a middleweight, which is 185. So he's moving up 20 pounds to fight in the light heavyweight division at 205. That's probably, I'd have to say that's probably why he's listed as an underdog at plus 330. And if you know anything about coming into fights at a different weight, especially a heavier weight, it can be tough. So Ryan Spann is a big favorite in this fight. He's got good striking. I believe he gets Sam Alvey out of there pretty quickly. If you had to ask me, first round, probably TKO. You'd have to pick Spann in this fight. I would have to. The next fight is at featherweight. It's Bryce Mitchell and Charles Rosa. Now, I don't know much about Rosa, but I know Mitchell is a dog, and he is the favorite in this fight at minus 165. I would go with Bryce in this fight, too. Then we start picking it up, man. Just third fight on the card already. Big fight. Former champ Carla Esparza against Michelle Waterson. Michelle Karate Hottie Waterson. Now, she might be good looking, but when it comes to her fight skills, let's say her looks got her where she is for the most part. I'll just keep it at that. Esparza is the favorite, and I would definitely go with Esparza in this fight. Probably a decision if I had to say, because Michelle is tough. But I think it'll be a pretty dominant, pretty dominant unanimous decision victory for Carla. The next fight on the card is the one that I talked about a few minutes ago. It's Ronaldo Jacare Souza against Uriah Hall. That fight is not going to happen. Souza tested positive for the virus. Kind of crazy, but not too shocking, right? That one out of these, maybe 20 fighters that are going to fight would test positive. It's not too shocking. Moving on, we have Vicente Luque versus Nico Price in a welterweight battle. I'll tell you what, Vicente Luque is tough, and he's the favorite in this fight at minus 280. But Nico is a beast, man. I do think Luque has the jiu-jitsu to get him out of there, possibly if it goes into the third round. But Nico, I gotta take the underdog. I think Nico is gonna get it done. Um, Probably a TKO in the second round, I'd say. But it's still a fight that could go either way, definitely. Then we get to the preliminary main event. I'm assuming this will be on. I don't know if they'll put it on ESPN or not. You would think they should, right? I'm not too positive, but that would be cool if they do it. I didn't check. We got Anthony Pettis and Donald Cowboy Cerrone. This one is as close as it should be as far as the fight line. It's very close. They do have Pettis as a minus 150 favorite. Pettis fought recently and lost to Nate Diaz in a decision, I believe it was, if I remember correctly. And Cerrone got knocked out pretty brutally against Jorge Masvidal in his last fight. So they're both coming off some losses, but they're both. I believe Donald Cerrone has the most fights in the UFC. It's something like 24 or 25 or some craziness. But he's been around forever. He's won a lot of fights, but he's never been able to win the championship fights or the big fights that would get him to a championship. Anthony he's got those kicks, man. He's got the kicks that make the highlight reel. Cerrone has some really good wins. If it stays standing, I think Pettis can take him apart. However, there's this thing about Donald where he'll lose some fights and he'll come back better and stronger than ever. And my head is saying to take Anthony Pettis in this fight, but my heart and the fact that if you're a betting man, you're going to win some money if you take Cerrone. Not much. He's a plus 125 underdog, so it's not going to be much. But I think Donald gets it done. I really do. I think he'll get him in possibly a submission, possibly second round. If it goes into the third round, I think Pettis might get the decision, but my heart's saying go with Cowboy in this fight. After that, we've got the main card, possibly first fight on the main card. That's how they have it listed here. It's Greg Hardy, who is a former NFL football player. He played for the Carolina Panthers. I believe he got signed by Dallas, the Cowboys. He got into some trouble. I'm not going to explain what kind of trouble he got into. Just look it up if you want to know. And got kicked out of the NFL and started fighting in the UFC. I believe he went right to the UFC, which is, it doesn't really happen unless you are a famous athlete or something like that, because he came in, he went into to give him credit, he went into the Contender Series, which is like the lower level of the UFC, won some fights, and now here he is. Now, in one of his more recent fights, he got disqualified, which scared some people, and they were thinking, uh-oh, here we go, here's his antics again. This guy's trouble, right? But to his credit, he's hanging in there. He got more chances, and he's doing well for himself. So, who am I to judge? Having said that, the guy he is going up against, I have no idea about. Like I said, I am a hardcore fan of MMA, and this guy, I'll tell you what, I know absolutely nothing about. Yorgan De Castro. I mean, I don't know if they're setting this guy up, Greg Hardy, with a tomato can just from the run through him, because if you get a former athlete, former pro athlete like Brock Lesnar or something like that, you want him to run through some guys. Although Brock Lesnar, when he came into the UFC, he got put in there right with some really good fighters. It looks like they're giving Greg a very easy fight here. He's surprisingly only a minus 195 favorite. But I have no idea about this Yorgan dude. And I've seen Greg Hardy. He's very powerful. He has great power in his right hand. He'll probably knock this dude unconscious. Probably very quickly first round. So I guess I would take that, knowing what I know about Greg Hardy and nothing about this other dude. All right. Next fight is another good one, man. Very, very good fight. Calvin Kattar versus Jeremy Lil Heathen Stevens. I remember a few years ago being at Buffalo Wild Wings and watching Jeremy Stevens fight Rafael dos Anjos. And it was a finish, I believe, in the third round. Yeah, I believe the first two rounds, Dos Anjos took him down and kind of had his way with him as far as jiu-jitsu wise and wrestling wise. But in the third round, Jeremy Stevens, and when I tell you wound up, this dude wound up his right hand like a bowling ball, like he was getting ready to roll a bowling ball, and threw the most beautiful uppercut. Well, there was another uppercut that was better, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but this guy, one of the most beautiful uppercuts you'll ever see, he landed that on Dos Anjos. Beautiful highlight knockout, man. Jeremy Stevens has great power for being a little guy. This is a featherweight division fight, which is 145. But for a 145 pounder, Stevens has as much power as you can get. Calvin Kattar has been on a roll lately. He is a minus 240 favorite against Stevens, but Stevens is one of those guys where he only loses to the absolute tip top contenders. I wouldn't necessarily call him a gatekeeper of the division, but I certainly would have to take Stevens, especially since he's an underdog at plus 200. And I believe he would get the knockout, maybe a TKO second or third round. Kattar's tough. He'll hang in there, but I would definitely have to go with Jeremy Stevens. Here's the next fight. And oh boy, it's the big boys. We got Francis Ngannou and Jair Rosenstruck. Now, earlier I mentioned how I went to UFC 218 at Joe Louis Arena, or not Joe Louis, sorry, at Little Caesars Arena, where the Pistons and the Red Wings play. I believe it was there. Ngannou was on that card, and he fought, what was his name? Alistair Overeem, yeah. He fought Alistair Overeem, who's a huge human being himself. Anyway, this is, without a doubt, the greatest uppercut finish in MMA history. Just my opinion, but you can look it up. This guy threw an uppercut so hard that I thought Overeem's head was going to roll into the ninth row where we were sitting. Snapped his head back to where you thought his head was going to completely roll off his shoulders. Sick. Absolutely sick. If you haven't seen that knockout, look it up. I mean, you're talking about real power this guy has. And he's been on quite a roll since he lost to Stipe. I'm pretty sure his last loss was against Stipe, the heavyweight champion right now. That being said, Jair is another guy who's got extremely good knockout power. He's been knocking guys out left and right as well. They have Francis as a minus 280 favorite. And apparently the winner of this fight, and the winner of this fight is going to fight Stipe. So it would be Francis getting his rematch, or it would be a new contender for the heavyweight championship, Jair. I mean, when you get these heavyweights together, it never fails. Somebody's going to get knocked out. That's just how it goes. There is the outlier where two heavyweights get in there and it ends up being a boring fight because nobody can land that big punch and they don't really have much else. But if I had to guess, I'd say Francis gets it done. I think he'll be the one to land the big punch. He's not a guy that throws too many head kicks or anything like that, but he does have some good low kicks, and he has that power in his hands. I think he'll land that overhand right or maybe a left hook, and I think he'll knock Jair out. Probably quickly, probably first round. And then here we go. We got the two title fights on the card. First one, it's Henry Cejudo, who is the champion, against Dominic Cruz, who is a former champion. Now, Henry was a champion. He was a two-division champion, but he had to give up one of the belts because he didn't defend it in time, so he just dropped that belt. So now he has the bantamweight championship, which is 135 pound belt. And he is a former Olympic gold medalist. Boy, oh boy. Guy's got it all. He's got it all. He's got tough takedowns. He's got great ground and pound. This is the fight I've been struggling with for a few days now, as far as making a pick, because here's the thing. I used to not like Dominic because he doesn't really have the power to get people out of there when it comes to striking power. He's had knockouts in his career, don't get me wrong, but he's not really a power puncher per se. But the guy always puts up a good fight. If Henry gets him down, it's a wrap. He's going to ground and pound him into submission. There's no question. But Dominic's been around a very long time. And here's the thing. He's a guy that has had a lot of issues when it comes to injuries. But in the same sense that he has not fought in so long right now, there have been times where he's taken a year or 2 years off in between fights and comes in there looking better than ever and winning via decision because he has that great footwork and he can outpoint you on the feet. Now, if he can do that, if he can keep his good footwork, if he can avoid the takedowns, use his speed, I think he will get it done. I think he will get a decision, probably a split decision, because I do think Henry will get him down a few times, and I do think he'll win a couple rounds. But I'll go with Dominic Cruz and a split decision victory. He's a plus 180 underdog, and he'll be the new bantamweight champion. That's my big upset. That's definitely my, spoiler alert, that's my big upset of the night. Which leads us to our main event. We've got Tony El Kakui Ferguson against Justin the Highlight Gaethje. This fight is huge. Now, if you're a UFC fan, you'll know that this fight was originally supposed to be Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. With this whole pandemic going on, something happened with Khabib where he got stuck over in Russia and he wasn't able to make the fight happen. Now, whoever's fault it really was, who knows? But regardless, this is what we get. And it's still a great one, trust me. Justin Gaethje is a plus 160 underdog. Justin was another fighter that was at UFC 218 that I attended in person. And he fought, and it was actually his last loss. It was against, I believe, it was Eddie Alvarez. Alvarez won that fight, I believe, in the third round, if I remember correctly. But it was a slugfest until then. Great fight. Justin, he's tough as nails. He can take a punch, man, and he's going to take a lot of punches in this one. Trust me. The guy's got the heart of a warrior. I've been watching him since he was in World Series of Fighting. He was the champion there. I believe he only has the one loss in the UFC, like I said, to Eddie Alvarez. And he has a win. I'm pretty sure he has a win over Michael Johnson, which Michael Johnson actually has a win over Tony Ferguson. So he's beaten the guy that he's fighting. He's beaten the guy that beat the guy that he's fighting. Excuse me. But that was a while ago. That was when Tony wasn't the beast that he is now and gone on this long string of wins that he's on. Of course, we know Khabib has, I believe, 27 victories in a row. But that fight will happen eventually. Tony Ferguson, he's got great striking. If Justin Gaethje can put the pressure on him and make Tony Ferguson go backwards, that's where he'll have the most success. The bad thing about that is not many people are able to do that to Tony Ferguson. And even if you get Tony Ferguson down on the ground, the guy has great he has great jiu-jitsu. He can tap you out. Tony Ferguson has amazing elbows, whether you're in the clinch or on the ground or standing. Doesn't matter. He can land them from anywhere. And he likes to be the one pressuring. He likes to be the bully. And essentially, I think that's what will happen. He's only a minus 190 favorite, which is a little surprising. I figured it would be more in the plus 260 range. But they got it at minus 190, and I'll give Justin credit. I think he'll hang in there as long as he can and try to make it go the distance. But I think Tony's going to cut him up, and they're going to end up stopping it. It'll probably be one of those crazy fights that gets stopped due to cuts. I can see Tony laying in those elbows. Definitely. So I'd say fourth round TKO probably, doctor stoppage, something like that for Mr. Tony Ferguson, and he'll become, if it happens, the only two-time interim lightweight champion. He had the interim belt before, and when he was supposed to fight Habib, but I believe he got injured, tripped over. You can't write this shit. I think he tripped over a wire during a press conference and hurt himself because he had sunglasses on. The dude's a nut. He's one of the craziest guys in fighting. Period. I watched a interview with him earlier where he did one with, I believe it was Stephen A. and Max, where he was on there, and Max was like, dude, you're crazy for taking this fight when you have a big money fight against Habib coming up. You're crazy. And he was just like, if you call me crazy, you're obviously just a casual fan or something like that. I forget exactly how he put it, but dude, you are crazy. Let's just admit that. Let's get that out of the way. You're a fucking nutbag, and we love you for it. So I think Tony will become the first and only interim two-time lightweight champion, and he will finally, let's hope, get that fight against Habib. Probably in Russia, because Dana White's this crazy bastard that wants to have fights overseas too during this pandemic. So that might happen. I know it's Ramadan right now, or whatever you call it, for Mr. Habib, so he's not going to be able to train because of that. So it's going to be a few months, probably a few months longer than it should be, but regardless, that fight will eventually happen. However, it has been said that if Justin wins, he gets the fight against Habib. So either way, we got some great fights coming up, regardless. And again, my hopes are that we get some new fans with this. But even more importantly than that, throw the fights on and watch them, man. Even if you're not a big fan of this, what else do you have to do? Get into the stories of all these guys. Get to know these guys and their backgrounds, and kind of follow them like you would a wrestler or a NASCAR driver or football players, individually. It's fun. It's a chess match once you learn the grappling part of it. Anybody can really understand the stand-up. Whoever lands punches does the best, but even that is more intricate than that. Anyway, if you learn about jiu-jitsu, if you learn about wrestling, man, it's like a chess match. It's just fun. And for the people that'll never get it, I understand. You'll just never get it, or you'll never want to get it, and that's fine. No problem with that at all. But if you get a chance to watch these fights, do it. Thank you, Dana White. Thank you to these fighters for putting this on. Thank you for Florida for allowing it to go on. They certainly did not have to do that, and there's all the politics that go into these individual states' governments. And let's hope we keep it rolling. Let's hope everything keeps getting better and back to whatever normal was. I don't like using the word new normal, but this isn't a political show. So if you like the video, man, give me a thumbs up. Enjoy the fights, more importantly. And if I have the notion, if I'm not too buzzed from drinking beers and having a good time, I'll probably jump on here and talk a little shit while the fights are going on here on YouTube. That could be fun.